Welcome back to this hilarious Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me, I still have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and a Professor of International Relations at the Achievers University of War, Ondo State. Professor Anthony Kila, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, and Chike Ogeah, Managing Director at Mark Foley Limited. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Professor Kila is in the Abuja studio of Arise News Channel. Okay, we've had 3 guests today, focusing essentially on the transition, focusing on the fuel subsidy removal, and we'll try to get a balanced view on the second subject. Let me start with you, Chike Ogeah.
Well, we listened to, I think, Senator Bukachua started the program, and you tried to give him a few digs, reminding him that he was the one that moved the motion to remind the president that indeed they could serve upon him a notice of impeachment. And you asked him rather tongue-in-cheek if he was looking forward to going back to the APC because of obviously the way he was talking. But he made it clear to you that indeed the president had done his best. And yes, when the president, even by the time the president came in, there were a lot of challenges with security in the country, especially in the Northeast. But that over time, it got worse. Katsina, Zamfara, Niger, and all of that. And that was when they got worried. Even in Abuja, I think they themselves even felt threatened. And that is why they had to cry out. But like Garba Shehu reminded us, and I was just laughing, it is beginning to happen. He said, don't worry, you people, whatever you like, you can say, but you will miss this president. I promise you. And very soon you will see people will start saying he's the best thing that happened to Nigeria. And I don't know whether we're already turning that corner. But as it were, he made it clear that the president had done his best, and he wished the president well, and that in as much as, yes, he did remind the president of that option of impeachment, it was to gear him up more or less. Then in the case of the deregulation, I think what Dr. Fawibe was saying is what most of us are thinking. Like, for instance, I felt that if deregulation is handled properly, we might be seeing a situation where we have different prices, different towns, different days, because it will all be subject to how each importer gets the product. So we are talking about multiple suppliers, removing monopoly, and that was why Dr. Fawibe also alluded to the fact that we are not looking at a situation of a private sector monopoly replacing a public sector monopoly. We don't want Dangote to replace NNPC as it was then. And we want a situation where these 4 refineries are quickly turned around. We've heard the kind of humongous monies that have gone into trying to resuscitate them. We need them to work. We need them to also add to what Dangote will do. And that is when I think we will begin to get the benefits of that, because that way we can not only service the region, like we were thinking, i.e. the sub-region, we can even service Africa. Because don't forget, he gave us a comparative study of all the prices across even the oil-producing countries in Africa, and they were all on the high side. Some over 1,000 naira, 900, 800 naira, and all of that. So we are still doing okay. But I think what the real issue here is, what are the palliatives for the downtrodden? You just don't throw the policy at the people that way. It was my opinion initially that maybe that departing government tried to throw this new government under the bus with this thing. But then I thought to myself, they're all in the same party. Are we sure they did not have a tete-a-tete and said, just like Dr. Fawibe said, well, we have tried to hold on to this thing. Now elections are upon us. If we do this thing, we all will suffer the collateral damage of, lack of popularity. So you, Asiwaju, I'm leaving, please. You take it on and do it. And maybe Asiwaju, he got Asiwaju's buy-in. I'm just second guessing, I don't know. That must be the reason why I think it was done this way. Because if that wasn't done, if that was not the reason, then I think it is most uncharitable to throw this kind of thing at this new regime and see them having a crisis in their hands, you know, just at the first minute of play. I pray wisdom. I mean, if anybody can handle this, I pray, you know, it should be Asiwaju. As I was looking at Joajero, just in closing, so I can yield the floor, I was just seeing shades of Ogeah in 1999. Yeah, because then I was working in the presidency, I was working with Chief Aseodo, you know, and at that time, this whole subsidy thing was squarely on his table, and he had been saying this since then. We needed to deregulate, we needed to deregulate, we needed to deregulate. And Oshomole would take on the streets in Abuja, he would come into our office, then I remember, he would make a lot of noise, shout, you know, he would say one thing today, he would go off again. And eventually we saw the transformation of Oshomole from a governor now to a senate, no, to a chairman of the ruling party now to a senator. And I'm just hoping and waiting. Let's see how the transformation and transmutation of Ajero will go, you know.
Okay, well, Professor Akintenwa, I know you are with me in the Lagos studio, but before I come to you, let's go to Professor Anthony Kila, who is in our Abuja studio. Professor Kila, over to you. The transition, then for substance.
Well, over to me. The transition. Well, I think it's a really sore note that a week into the new administration, we're having these very hard moments for Nigerians, because otherwise, you know, today we'll have been talking about the speech, which I thought was a very good speech given by the new president, because it was a speech that not only appreciated the importance of the role, but a sense of duty and a clear understanding of the situation in the country. I think it's a matter of semiotics, you know, that phrase, subsidy is gone, is the origin of where we are today now, because in reality, this new administration has not done a single thing to affect subsidy. We are being affected by the decision that was made by the last administration. I hear those who, you know, say when you're in the new seat, you could take a new path. It's possible. The new president had two options in front of him: to conform, toe the line, and damn or face the consequences, or, you know, just change it and review it. If I were president, I would not have taken this option. I would have done something else. But, you know, I'm not president. He is president, and he has to deal with it. What has happened, I was talking about semiotics, is the difference between gone, or is going to go. What we have is somebody says gone, and so two things happened. One is that consumers were panic buying, you know, a very raw case of what happens when we talk about demand and supply in economics, where people who normally buy 20 liters, first they started buying 40 liters to store for some days, which wasn't necessary. I tried to dissuade some people from doing that. And the other thing was the uncertainty of the marketers themselves, the sellers, who were not sure what was going to happen. But then again, it must be said that this president, whilst being a candidate, has said many times that he will remove all subsidy, which means he agreed with the removal. But it must also be said that the other two major candidates agreed that they were going to remove the subsidy. What is missing is that we, the citizens, and, you know, we can't blame ourselves, so let's blame the media, were not shown the scenario to say, okay, Mr. Removal of oil subsidy, once you do it, what exactly is going to happen? And, you know, how are we going to deal with it? There is a general call, so I'm going to say something unpopular now. There's a general call of this palliative of distributing cash to people. I don't agree with it, because no matter how much you give, he's just going to die inside the inflation tunnel, the ugly tunnel of inflation. What we need to do is to create alternative means of transport, mass transport, and perhaps try to reduce other costs. The reason why people are feeling the energy policy, petroleum in this case, is that it affects everybody and everything. I would want those who are advising the president and who are making policy to think of somebody who earns 50,000 100,000 naira that has to spend close to half of that on transportation. That is the kind of case study we need to use to deal with things. I think that's a crucial way to look at it. I'd like to, the man who asked for the impeachment of Buhari, I think that's one of the best things that happened in the assembly, because it is good for an assemblyman to stand up and be counted. And I think that legislator did what a legislator should have done. You wouldn't forget him, and he wasn't being frivolous. He was serious on the matter. The reference that was made by Chike Ogeah, very wicked reference by Chike Ogeah, by the way, to Garba Shehu, this idea that we're going to miss Buhari, we're not going to miss Buhari. I pray we don't miss him. May we not meet him. But let us also agree that if for any reason we miss the Buhari administration, or even the man himself, it is an index that the incoming people, the new ones that came after him, have failed. If we miss what is gone, it means the new thing is very bad. So I say this, not hatred or anything for Buhari the man or his administration, although I don't like it. But I say it so that the new people can know that they need to up their game, and they will not have time for gradual reform. There's a need for quantum leaps in method, in content, in appearance, and in communication for everything the government does.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kila. Your friend and brother professor is here today. Professor Akinterewa.
I greet him very warmly.
Professor Akinterewa, over to you. Has President Jonathan been vindicated? 2022 to 2023.
I think it's more than vindication. You see, the submissions of our three guests, very interesting. When we begin with Senator Bulkashua, I disagree with him on 2 points. I agree with him on one. For instance, he started his submission by saying that the intention to impeach President Muhammadu Buhari was not because of inefficiency. That he told us, he used two other adjectival words. He told us that the main rationale behind trying to impeach him was because of one issue, which he later identified and articulated as insecurity. Because efforts were made at the level of the National Assembly to provide concrete assistance to enable President Buhari to contain insecurity. But he said at the end of the day that, look, he was not forthcoming. How can you tell us that your reason for seeking to impeach Buhari was not inefficiency, when at the end of the day you now come back to say, well, all efforts made to assist him, to make do, to make progress, he didn't do that one. So there's a contradiction there, apparent contradiction. In other words, the first hypothesis he submitted, Buhari is an epitome of inefficiency. There is no disputing that. So you have not convinced me that he's better than an inefficient president. The second point, he said that the president, the outgone immediate past president, Buhari, had little time to focus attention on this issue of insecurity and other problems. I cannot understand the notion of little time. 8 years, 365 days, times 8. Now, the later part of his tenure, that was the time he was now showing more seriousness. No, this is a fantastic contradiction. So I cannot really understand precisely what he wants me to understand from his submission. Now, the one point that I agree with him is the mere fact that he said that $250 million US, not naira, $250 million specifically provided to ensure the recovery of the refineries. He even suggested that the new president should be kind enough to investigate, to tell us where are we about these refineries. These refineries, have they been repaired? Are they under repair? He is even, look, in diplomatic parlance, when you try to engage in textual analysis, where you put some words, he did tell us that the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, should investigate, all right, what has happened to the money. So he doesn't need to tell us now that something has happened to the 250 million. But the mere fact that he negatively or indirectly put that suggestion to us that it should be investigated, yes, something might have happened to that 250 million. So I'm particularly interested too to say, where is this this amount of $250 million meant for rehabilitating, refurbishing the refineries? This is very, very important. When you now come to Joe Ajero, I like his expression. The way he put it, he said that abortion before pregnancy, we should not look at it from that angle. Why you can't abort before pregnancy? Pregnancy must first of all take place before you can now come back and abort. I like that analogy. Generally, I agree to a great extent with his submission. The problem there is this. The Labour has consistently been opposed to subsidy removal. That has been their position. But the issue is that as it is, most Nigerians, including laymen like us, now they want this removal to be off. But the way the government is handling the matter is such that the government is not consulting the way it should be. And that is why, for instance, I will agree with Dr. Dina Fawibe, who suggested that President Tinubu should, in this particular case, try as much as possible to negotiate, to dialogue with the Labour. I subscribe with the position of the Labour in this particular case. So, pleading, if Dr. Fawibe is saying it is tragic, it is bad all along. No, I wouldn't say anything bad in there. The critical point to underscore here is this, and we may come to that discussion. No work, no pay. Will there be the policy of no work, no pay to Labour in this particular situation? How are you going to deal with that one? And it's an indefinite strike. So, you don't pay, fine, you don't work. Please, in France, the idea of strike, let me tell you how it works. I was in France in recent time to go and carry out research. They were on strike. Workers were there in the office. They sat down. When I got there, they said, Monsieur, c'est la grève. But you opened door, you are there. He said, no, yes, they don't work, but they are physically present. That is another meaning to strike. Ruben.
I get your point, but let's take another subject before we begin to wrap up. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu last week had a closed-door meeting with service chiefs, led by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Rabo. Others at the meeting were Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Farouk Yahaya, Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Awa Gambo, Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Isiaka Amao, and Inspector General of Police, Usman Akali Baba. This marked Tinubu's first official engagement with the security heads since assumption of office. On Wednesday, Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdurrashid Bawa, was at the villa to brief the president on the progress of the war against corruption. Okay, all of this within the context of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu hitting the ground running. And security is something that everyone has considered the big elephant in the room. What are the prospects? What should we expect? With kidnapping, insurgency, even with President Buhari saying, oh, he tried to solve the problem, particularly in the Northeast. Let me start with you this time, Professor Kila, in our Abuja studio.
Yes, we saw the meeting. I think given the state and the general perception in the country that security is on the top 5 list of things that Nigeria consider important and indeed urgent to deal with, it's a good thing that the president is having those meetings. Those who are at the meeting and those who are charged to deal with security will have better details, but from the outside, overall, I think there are 3 or 4 things to consider, with the security. Is either the security chiefs are incompetent, or they are overwhelmed, or there was something or somebody impeding them from absorbing their function so far. And I think as a new office holder, that is what the new administration should be looking at. They should be asking themselves, the same people have been there for a while, they haven't really blown people, they haven't lit the world on fire, they haven't done great things, they haven't achieved their marks. So why are they not achieving their marks? Is it that individuals are incompetent, the system is overwhelming or inadequate, or there were some people who are stopping them for doing their duties? If the president and his team can reason that way, then I am sure we shall get results very soon. Because if the system is overwhelming, you simply provide them what they need. If the people are incompetent, you simply fire them. If somebody was stopping them, you not only fire that person, you even arrest him. And that should solve the problem. Of course, these are broad strokes, but the details, it's an executive summary of what I think the situation should be seen as.
Well, Professor Akinterewa.
2 quick issues involved. The president talked about across purposes. I do not believe that the issue is about working across purposes. The critical point is that we do have, competitive objectives. The agencies are trying to compete, to outdo, to perform better than the others. They have common objective. The common objective is security. It's clearly stated, everybody knows that. But operationally, in terms of their operational methodologies, they differ. And I do not know how you will want a DIA, an NIA, and the SSS to have the same methodological framework for the operation. It's not possible. We need to distinguish between these two. And the other problem that everybody knows, but we refuse to talk about that. Goodluck Jonathan, in the goodness of his luck, told us that there are Boko Haramis in government. So if you have a service chief who has some people, you have all these anti-government in government. So how do you go about that? Those are the issues to address. If you want to securitize the country, now go and deal with the Boko Haramis who surrendered, who were later retrained and put in government, but we don't know what they are doing. You cannot keep enemy in your house and still expect to have security.
Ogeah?
Yeah, for me, it's simple. Kila talked about, Prof, 5 priorities. I think security is number 1. And it is expected what happened. I see that as a briefing and a handing over of sorts, because for 8 years we have followed the same template, whether we want to agree with what Professor Akintarawa is saying about the different security agencies working towards a common purpose but using different methodology. If you ask me, I would say that the whole methodology should be changed at this juncture. I remember...
They call it infrastructure.
Whatever they like, they call it. But I remember a time in America where there was a guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Yeah.
I also remember a lady called Condoleezza Rice. These were, because that is the hub of security, but we don't seem to understand that in Nigeria. Your NSA is so critical. And these are people who had nothing to do with the military. I don't know why we have that psychology in Nigeria that NSC must be militarized or some form of military man at some point or the other. I think it now shows that intelligence gathering is much more than shooting a gun. So I think it is time for us to move beyond that. I'm sure Asiwaju will be well briefed now, and the steps he should take should be well known to him. We expect that shortly.
Okay, let's take one more topic. Chairman of DA Communications Limited and frontline media practitioner, High Chief Raymond Dokwesi, last week died at the age of 71. Dokwesi was a chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, died on Monday, May the 29th in Abuja. The death of the media mogul who pioneered private broadcasting in Nigeria was announced in a statement by his son, Raymond Dokwesi Jr. In the statement, the family expressed gratitude for the support received from Nigerians. They also asked for privacy as they go about the burial arrangements of the media entrepreneur. Well, High Chief Raymond Dokwesi, 1957 to 2023, a major icon in the media profession in Nigeria. But I'll reserve my own comments. I can spend the next remaining minutes. Let me come to you, Chike Ogeah.
Yeah, it was a big shock, and because over the time I was a commissioner in Delta, my colleague Richard Buffet Damijo, who's popularly called RMD, is particularly close. I think he was like a father figure to his wife, and they were very close. And through Richard, I got very close to the High Chief, and I found in him such an amiable person. It is noteworthy that he was a pioneer in everything he did. Let's even leave the media for now. If you remember, in the days of shipping.
Yes, he has a PhD in shipping.
Okay, he was one of the pioneers.
From Poland.
I think he was partners of sorts with, was it Yaradua or Abiola? I don't know which of them in the shipping business.
Yes.
And he started very early. Then I will never forget in Lagos when we first had Ray Power. And that was the advent of private broadcasting. Then he went into 24 hours broadcasting. Then AIT came on stream. And, he has done these great things for Nigerian media. I'm sure he'll be sorely missed. And to you people, your constituency, I say sorry. You've lost a
committed party man.
You lost a great man.
He was also a provider of jobs and opportunities.
That's right.
And he was a jolly good fellow who enjoyed what the French call the joie de vivre, the joy of living. Whether he was listening to Sonny Ade or he was inviting people to his home. And he was, above all of that, a very distinguished family man who looked out for his own and looked out for other people. Prof, you will summarize. I don't want to get going. Let me quickly call Professor Kila, and then we'll wrap it up with Professor Akintarawa.
Oh yes, the loss of Chief Raymond Dokwesi definitely is a sad and shock news. I mean, he was a man. I knew him personally. Was a man of full of life, and you're right, a pioneer in every aspect, in a lot of aspects of his life. He's a man who lived life to the fullest. It is good for Nigerians to remember him as a man who, in academics, he excelled. He liked to remind me that he got a DSc, not PhD, a Doctor of Science. You know, he liked to emphasize. He was a man who excelled in academics, in business, in friendship, and you know, the kind of Nigerian most Nigerians would dream of, who had friends across the country and across region. And above all, he was passionate. You know, he did everything almost to an excess. You know, he was very passionate about everything he did. And I think in the history of this country, a place will be reserved for him. And for young people who are looking for motivation, he's one of those figures that should be looked at for motivation in many aspects. So it's a big shame, you know, my condolences to his whole family and to his Edo State and the whole of Nigeria, and to many sectors, industries, and many communities, especially civil society's leaders, will remember it from his generosity and his moral and material support. A very big loss indeed, you know.
Big loss indeed, and we're hoping that his successors, his heirs, would find the courage, the wisdom, the determination to sustain his media empire, which has been a major contribution to the media industry in Nigeria. Professor Akintenewa, what do you think?
Dokpesi is a dogged fighter. I knew him from the time AIT was put in place. I was then editorial page editor. This day we were in Toyin in Ogeah. And they brought letters of invitation, Victor Ifige, Ijoma Wogugu, all of them asking us to come and take active part in the inauguration of the AIT. Then the next thing I would discover is that he had problem with government. Either Sonny Abacha wanted to take over AIT all along. He fought back gallantly, etc. all along. So this type of legacy, what AIT, Ray Power should sustain is his legacy, so that it is not the person of Dokpesi that we are losing, that will be lost. No, the legacy must not be thrown into garbage of history. So we thank God. Look at how, for instance, Africa, culture, all those things we figure in their advertorials, in their presentations. The way, for instance, we also have Arise News now projecting, you know, the culture of the whole world. May his soul rest in peace. God be with the family he left behind.
Well, the key thing about the likes of High Chief Raymond Dokpesi is how his likes have helped to restructure the information order. There's something we call the New World Information Order. By creating media establishments, you report Africa to the world, and you remind the world that there is something called the African narrative. And then you also create, through entrepreneurship, jobs and opportunities for the country. These are the diamonds that President Buhari talked about. The people who invested in Nigeria, who moved Nigeria forward. There's no doubt that High Chief
Tony Momo did that one.
Will be greatly missed. We remember him with fondness and sadness, and we commiserate with his family. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. Thank you very much for watching.